Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Everything changed the day I saw my mother's car parked outside that house. She was supposed to be home, but there she was, betraying us with Edwin Robinson. The discovery shattered my world. My father found them half-dressed, and his fury was terrifying. He took her car and left her with nothing. Our family was destroyed that day. This is my story, a brutal revelation of deceit and revenge, seen through the eyes of a son caught in the middle. I do not really know why my mother and I never became close. Perhaps it was because of the way I saw her treat my father. She constantly criticized him over trivial matters, things that were never really his fault. He spent his entire marriage being picked apart, and I never understood why he stayed with her if she was so unhappy. I was born a year after they got married, their only child. My mother is an attractive woman, now 40 years old. In old photographs, she was strikingly beautiful in her youth. Maybe that was what drew my father to her, but their marriage has lasted far longer than their love. I have faint memories of happy moments from my early childhood, but they feel like echoes of a distant past. By the time I was 13, I was convinced they would get divorced, but for reasons unknown, they never did. It was not that my mother was angry at me, she just seemed mad at the world. I was too afraid to ask my father about their relationship, so I was left to figure it out on my own. My name is Ron Francis. I am 16 years old and will be starting my senior year in high school next month. I am set to graduate with the class of 58, and I hope to attend state college to begin working toward my degree. My father, Sam Francis, is someone I truly admire. He is intelligent, well-informed, and always helps me with my homework, especially in math. My mother, Helen Francis, well, you probably already have an idea of what she is like. Both of my parents would be considered attractive by most people. As for me, I'm still growing. Since joining the swim team, I have gained some muscle, and my girlfriend tells me it looks good. I believe her. My father works as a middle manager in an insurance company, earning enough that my mother never had to work while I was young. When I turned 15, I started wondering why she never got a job or even volunteered to keep herself busy. She had no hobbies and did not seem to socialize much with the neighborhood women. Since I was in school during the weekdays, I had no idea how she spent her time. During my summer breaks, I worked at the new supermarket as a box boy, helping customers with their groceries and making deliveries on my bike. When I got my driver's license, I used the store's van for deliveries, keeping me busy most of the time. Because of that, I still did not know what my mother did during the summer. I found out by accident. That is often how these things happen, right? One afternoon, I was delivering groceries to an elderly woman, and as I pulled up to her house, I noticed a familiar car parked next door. It was my mother's old '49 Pontiac. I recognized the scratched fender even before checking the license plate. I had no idea who lived in that house. After making the delivery, I sat in the van, staring at the car, wondering. I took out my notepad and jotted down the address with a big question mark beside it. Then, I tucked the notepad away and continued my rounds. I did not think about it again until dinner that evening. As usual, my father asked my mother how her day had been. The usual, she responded tiredly. I was home all day, with not much to do. I just sat on the back porch in the shade and read for a while. I looked at her, searching for any sign that she was lying. She seemed completely normal, but I knew the truth. A strange sensation tightened in my stomach, and it did not go away even after dinner. Later that night, I sat at my desk, thinking about what she had said. I pulled out my notebook and copied the address into my school binder. I needed to figure out who lived there. I remembered that the library had a reverse directory, a book that allowed you to look up an address and find out who resided there. I made a mental note to check it out as soon as possible. The next day, during lunch, I made a quick trip to the library. I flipped through the directory and found a name, Edwin S. Robinson. I had no idea if he lived alone or with family, but at least I had something. I was not sure what to do next. On Tuesday, I had seen my mother's car there at 2:30 in the afternoon. Maybe I could drive by again at the same time and see if she was there again. On Wednesday, I altered my delivery route slightly and passed by the Robinson house at around 2:45. Her car was not there. Had it been a one-time thing? But on Thursday, while driving through our neighborhood at around 2 o'clock, I noticed her car was missing from our driveway. I checked my delivery schedule, made a quick adjustment, and headed back toward the Robinson house. Sure enough, there it was again. I now had a mystery on my hands. I just did not know what to do about it. Everyone needs someone they can confide in. For me, That person was my girlfriend, Penny Lane. She was the one person I could trust with something like this without the entire town finding out. I should mention, I live in a small town. People say that in places like this, everyone knows everyone, but that is not entirely true. Our town is not that small, or maybe people just do not socialize like they used to. I cannot even say I know half of the people here. Sure, we only have one high school, 2 supermarkets, and a single drive-in theater, but there is still plenty I do not know about my surroundings. Penny, her real name is Peony, and I grew up together. We will both be seniors soon, and though we have been friends forever, we have recently started seeing each other in a different way. She is beautiful, and I am lucky to call her my steady girlfriend. She is also incredibly smart, which is why I turned to her when I need advice. I had no adults I could talk to about this. Certainly not my parents. Since I saw Penny almost every day, I did not have to wait long to tell her what I had seen. I wanted to see if she had any ideas about what we should do next. She did not disappoint. Well, there are a couple of things we could try, she said confidently. Like what? I asked, surprised that she had a plan so quickly. I could pretend to be conducting a survey and ask them some questions. I could say I am with the school newspaper, trying to gauge how many people read it. I could casually ask how many people live in the house, whether they are men or women, adults or kids. That might work, I admitted. But my mom slams the door on people like that. It is always a risk, but if someone answers, we might get important information. She smiled. Why do you have to do it and not me? I asked. This is my problem. They might recognize you or know something about your family. It is safer this way. Penny was always one step ahead. We spent an hour coming up with the perfect survey questions. Penny said the right questions could make people reveal more than they realized. By the end, we had 7 solid questions that she was certain would give us valuable insights into the Robinson household. She planned to visit their house the next morning at 10 o'clock. If no one was home, she would try again at 7 o'clock in the evening. But I had a job too. Ron, I want you to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning, she instructed. I need to know who leaves the house and when. I agreed. And just like that, we had a plan. At 6:50 the next morning, I was already in position, hidden behind a large hedge across the street. At exactly 7 o'clock, a man, whom I assumed to be Mr. Robinson, stepped out. He had a newspaper tucked under one arm and a small briefcase in the other. He walked to his car, placed his things in the back seat, and got in. He let the car idle for a couple of minutes before a woman came out, locked the door, and got into the passenger seat. Together, they drove off toward town. That answered some of my questions, no children, and they both left at the same time. But there were still mysteries to solve. I rode my bike to a nearby phone booth, dropped a nickel into the slot, and dialed Penny's number. She picked up almost immediately, as if she had been waiting by the phone. What happened? She asked eagerly. Not much, I said. He left just before 7, and I think his wife followed a couple of minutes later. They drove toward town. I did not see any children, and she locked the door, so I doubt anyone was home. Good work, Ron. What were they wearing? She asked, almost as an afterthought. He was dressed in a suit and tie with a hat. She had on a simple dress, gray and blue, I think. I replied, trying to recall the details. Okay, sounds like they both have jobs. Next, we need to find out where they work. Can you follow them tomorrow? She asked, her voice filled with excitement. I can try, but I might not be able to keep up on my bike, I admitted. Yeah, that could be a problem, Penny said thoughtfully. I knew to stay quiet while she came up with a plan. She was good at this. Ron, I think we should go to the library and check the voter registration list. It sometimes includes occupations, which might tell us what they do for a living. I had not thought of that. Okay, can you do that for me? I have to work today and might not have time. Sure, leave it to me. Just remember to check the house around 2 this afternoon, she reminded me. I will meet you at my house after dinner. Do not be late. I want to try out that survey on them. Got it. See you then. Good luck, and thanks, Penny. You are a good friend, I said sincerely. Be careful, Ron. Do not do anything reckless. We do not know what is really happening yet, she cautioned. Yeah, I will be fine. See you later, I finished before hanging up the phone. I rode my bike to the store, parked it in the loading shed as usual, grabbed the van keys from the shipping counter, and started my deliveries. I usually handled the restaurant orders first, and today was no different. But I had to admit, my mind was not entirely on my work. I was too preoccupied with the thought of what my mother was doing at Edwin S. Robinson's house. It was one thing for her to be distant or even mean, but it was another thing entirely for her to cheat on my father. I had looked up the word adulteress in the dictionary, and it was not a nice term. It described a woman who betrayed her husband. It was hard to believe, but I was beginning to think it was possible. The day passed quickly, and I was too busy to dwell on my mother's secret visits. But as I rode home after work, the thoughts crept back into my mind. If she was cheating, what would I do? Would I tell my father? Could I? I did not want to hurt him, but I could not just let her get away with it either. I realized with a sinking feeling that I had already decided she was guilty, without any real proof. Maybe I had been too quick to assume the worst just because I did not like her much. It was not a good feeling. There could be a perfectly innocent reason for her being there. After all, she had not gone today. But then again, she seemed to go only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. After rushing through dinner, I excused myself to go to Penny's. My mother reminded me about the dishes, so I waited for my parents to finish eating before quickly washing up and cleaning the kitchen. Be home by 9. My father reminded me as he handed me the car keys. I will, Dad. Thanks, I said, meaning it. I would not let him down. I arrived at Penny's around 6:30. She was already waiting for me. All set? I asked. Yes, I have the questionnaire right here, she said, holding up a neatly typed paper. I used my father's stationery to make it look more official. I suddenly remembered the voter registration list. Oh, what did you find out? The list shows his occupation as a salesman and his wife's as a secretary. Both are registered voters, she said confidently. She got into the car, and we drove to the Robinson house. It was still light out, but the sun would be setting within the hour. Penny had dressed carefully, a simple navy blue skirt, a white blouse, and plain black shoes. She wanted to appear professional so they would be more likely to answer her questions. I parked about a block away, and she got out. Wish me luck, she said with a nervous smile. You will be fine. I know it, I said reassuringly. If anyone could pull this off, it was Penny. She returned about 10 minutes later, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Ron, you will never believe it, she gasped. They both came to the door and started answering questions, then started arguing over who had the correct answers. Her eyes sparkled. I was proud of her. Nice job. Let's go somewhere and figure out what we learned, I suggested. She nodded, and we drove to one of our favorite spots by the river. Penny studied her notes in silence, deep in thought. I reminded myself not to interrupt her. Okay, here's what we learned, she began. They both work and have no children. He is a route salesman for a paper box company, and she is a secretary at Columbia State Bank. He goes out of town on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and she takes the bus home on those days. Ron, it was incredible. Once they started talking, they just would not stop. I even made up a few extra questions on the spot, she admitted. Wow, what else did you find out? I asked eagerly. Well, he grew up here. She is from Bend River. They met when he came back from Europe after the war. It sounds like she cannot have children. And, she hesitated, then added, he is actually a good-looking man. Maybe your mother noticed that too. I frowned. They seem to be doing well financially, Penny continued. They have been buying new furniture, and they just got a new hi-fi and a 21-inch television. He said he will be installing the antenna this weekend. Okay, so now we know about them, I said. But that does not explain what my mother is doing at his house. Not exactly, Penny admitted. But remember, he is in town all day on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He has time to go home in the afternoons before picking up his wife from work. She wrinkled her brow. I think the police call that opportunity when they are investigating someone. She suddenly sat up straight. Oh, what high school did your mother go to? She asked excitedly. Jefferson, I answered. It is closed now. She grinned triumphantly. That is the same high school he went to. That was one of my made-up questions, she added, beaming. You are amazing, Penny, I said, genuinely impressed. I was lucky to have her as my girlfriend. The more time I spent with her, the more I wanted to be with her. But this discovery changed everything. Mom and Edwin Robinson were the same age. They had gone to high school together. They must have known each other back then. But what was going on between them now? I sat in the car quietly for a long time. Penny watched me, waiting. This is not good, is it? She finally said. No, it is not, I admitted. But we do not have any proof. I do not know what to do next. Penny was silent for a while, then she spoke again. What if we scare your mother? She asked. I turned to her in shock. What do you mean? And that was when Penny revealed her next plan, one that would set everything into motion. Lying on the bed, Mr. Robinson must have been scared out of his wits because I later heard that he tried to hide in the closet while my father yelled at my mother. It was a terrible scene. Dad snatched her car keys from her purse, stormed out, and drove her car home, something that never happened since the garage was always reserved for the Dodge. I am not sure how he got his own car back. Maybe he took a taxi. By the time I arrived home, the Dodge was parked in the driveway, and Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, a strong drink in front of him. There was no sign of my mother. I knew I had to play dumb or risk getting caught up in the storm. So, I asked, "Where is Mom?" "She is not here," he said sharply, his voice thick with anger. "And she is not coming back." He practically spat out the words. "What do you mean?" I asked, doing my best to sound confused. "I caught her in bed with another man, son," he said, his voice unwavering. "She cheated on me, on us. She has been unfaithful, and I am going to divorce her." His words were clear and final. "Holy cow, Dad. Are you sure?" I asked, genuinely stunned. I had expected him to be heartbroken, maybe even confused, but instead, he was decisive and filled with rage, like a man on a mission for revenge. I had never seen this side of him before. "It is hard not to be sure when they are practically without anything on a bed together," he muttered bitterly. "Your mother did not even try to deny it." He was not even looking at me as he spoke. He took another drink, his eyes fixed on the glass in front of him. "She is going to pay for this," he growled. "She will not have anything when this is over. She will be lucky to walk away with the clothes on her back." His fury was undeniable. I silently hoped that my mother would not come home that night. I feared what might happen if she did. But then, I started wondering, where was she? Where could she possibly go? I needed to talk to Penny. "I am going over to Penny's," I told Dad. "I am not hungry." He just nodded and took another drink. I rode my bike to Penny's house, pedaling slowly, my mind spinning. When I got there, I was a mess. It took everything I had to tell her what had happened. It was the worst news imaginable. I sat with my head in my hands, feeling completely miserable. I was not good company that night, or for many nights after. My mother had disappeared, and it would be a long time before I would hear from her again. Surprisingly, Dad and I managed fine on our own. We handled the laundry, except for his shirts, which we sent out for pressing, and even learned how to iron, though not very well. We split the housework and figured out how to cook simple meals so we could eat properly and stay healthy. One day, Dad surprised me by giving me the keys to Mom's car. It was actually his car. He had just let her drive it. "I am trusting you with this," he said. I promised to keep it in good shape and wash it every week, something I had already been doing for Mom, so it was not a big deal. Not many seniors at my school had their own cars, so I felt lucky. Meanwhile, Dad struggled to serve my mother with divorce papers. It was difficult tracking her down, but eventually, he found her at her aunt's house in Salem. The legal proceedings began. "Since the reason for the divorce is adultery," Dad told me, "the court will not be kind to her." As for Mr. Robinson, I did not know what would happen to him, but he was named as something called the correspondent in the case. It took almost a year for the divorce to be finalized, and Mom ended up with almost nothing. "She got $500, her clothes, and her jewelry," Dad said. "That is all she will have to start over." Too many people in town knew what she had done, and they would never let her forget it. 3 months after Mom left, Dad started dating someone new. Her name was Janine Carter. She worked at his office and had been a widow since the Korean War. Janine needed a job, so she came to work at my office, Dad explained one night. "I have known her for years. I was happy for him. He deserved to be happy again." He had moved past the anger and revenge I saw that first night. We talked a lot about college, and he told me the decision was mine, whether to go straight to state college or spend 2 years at the local junior college. "It depends on whether I get a swimming scholarship," I told him. Dad did not seem too worried about money. "Do what is best for you," he said. "Do not worry about the cost." That took a huge weight off my shoulders. Penny and I remained close. She felt guilty about my parents' divorce, thinking none of this would have happened if she had not suggested sending those letters. They were already unhappy, I reminded her. Maybe this was for the best. I lost touch with my mother and did not make much effort to find her. She sent me a Christmas card with a return address in Salem, where her aunt had lived. I assumed she was still staying there. I never sent her a card in return, and I did not feel bad about it. A few months later, a lawyer contacted us. My mother's aunt had passed away and left me a small sum of money, a $100 bond for my education. I barely remembered her, so I was surprised she had left me anything. But that money covered almost 1/3 of my first-year tuition at State College, and for that, I was grateful. Meeting Janine, Dad introduced me to Janine at Thanksgiving. She had blonde hair, a big smile, and an upbeat personality. She was about 35, not much younger than Dad. I could see why he liked her. She was cheerful and full of life, the exact opposite of how my mother had been in recent years. So I was not surprised when Dad told me he planned to propose as soon as the divorce was finalized. If she says yes, she will move in with us, he said. She will stay in the spare room until we are married. I had to laugh. Can you imagine people worrying about such things in 1958? I said. Times were changing, but Dad was still playing by the old rules. Still, I was happy for him. In late June, I sat at the kitchen table with Janine, talking about college and my relationship with Penny. She was interested. I think it is sweet that you and Penny have been together since childhood, she said. Then she bluntly asked me something that made me blush. Have you two been intimate? No, I stammered, caught off guard. She laughed. I had my first serious boyfriend when I was 15. We started talking about love. She mentioned her first husband. I thought I loved him, she said casually. But it turned out differently. She did not seem too upset about his death in Korea. Who said he died in Korea? She asked suddenly, looking confused. That is what Dad told me, I said. She laughed again. No way. I left him. Got a quick divorce in Reno. He is probably living in some trailer park in Idaho. I was stunned. I suddenly felt sick. I excused myself and drove straight to Penny's house. When I got there, she saw my face and knew something was wrong. Ron, what is it? She asked, concerned. I took a deep breath. Penny, I said, we have a new mission. We have to find my mother. I had graduated, which meant it was time to choose a branch of the military that would give me the best chance of becoming a pilot. Frank had been in the Air Force, so he naturally believed that was the best choice. When I returned to Corvallis to start my summer job, I was met with another big surprise. Penny had tried to call me while I was up north. She left a number, but it was for a motel in Eugene, and by the time I got back, she had already checked out. That really got me thinking. With Liz gone, there was no one else I was particularly excited to see except for Mom and Frank. Penny and I had been incredibly close. Even though we were young, we had talked about marriage. We were only 18 back then, but we were deeply in love. We had known each other since grade school. After I moved to Oregon, we wrote letters for a while, but it became clear that maintaining a relationship from a distance was difficult. I eventually told her to move on because I was not planning to come back anytime soon. She knew I was not going to visit my father after what he had done to my mother. A while later, she wrote to me, saying she had met someone new, a nice guy with whom she had a lot in common. I think my letter hurt her feelings. At the time, I believed I was in love with Liz, but Penny's message stirred something in me. It felt strange knowing she was with someone else. I did not fully realize how strong my feelings for her still were, until I got that phone message. We were both 21 now, about to start our last year of college, and we needed to plan our futures. The more I thought about my own future, two things kept coming back to me, Penny and flying. Now, I had something to look forward to, and someone I wanted to talk to. I decided to call Penny at home and find out what was going on in her life. I needed a private place to make the call, so I thought of my Aunt Hilda. I called her from the dorm and explained what I wanted to do. She was happy to help and told me I could repay her for the long-distance charge. Aunt Hilda reminded me that we were 2 hours behind Aberdeen, so the best time to call would be after 6 p.m., when the rates were lower, but still early enough for Penny to answer. That sounded perfect. She also invited me over for dinner. I could not say no to one of her home-cooked meals. She wanted to hear all about Mom and her new husband, so it worked out well. My new summer job was in Salem, so I had to figure out how to commute without too much hassle. Thanks to the OSU Alumni Network, I had been offered a better-paying position since I was now a co-captain of the swim team. On Monday morning, I showed up at Capital Motors for my first day. When I checked in at the office, I was told that the boss was not in yet and would not be for another hour. So, I wandered through the empty showroom, looking at the new Fords and Mercurys, wishing I could afford one. After a while, I stepped outside to the used car lot. It was easy to see the two types of cars, the shiny, newer models parked at the front and the older, worn-out ones in the back. I promised myself that when I bought my first car, it would be from the front row. At around 9 a.m., Mr. Randolph, the owner and an OSU alumnus, arrived. I waited until he had settled into his office, then knocked on the door frame. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Yeah? What can I do for you?" he asked in a gruff voice. "I'm Ron Francis from OSU. I was told to report here for a summer job." "Oh yeah," he muttered. "See Marty Carlson. He will tell you what to do." Then he paused. "Do you have a car?" "No, I take the bus," I replied. He leaned back in his chair. "All right, you can use any car from the back row. Just do not take the same one 2 days in a row." I blinked. "Huh?" I asked, dumbfounded. He chuckled at my reaction. "I guess no one told you. I will let you borrow a car to get here and back, as long as you rotate them. And do not even think about taking one from the front row. Got it?" I could barely believe it. Yes, of course. "Thank you. That is great," I stammered. He waved me off. "Go find Marty Carlson. He is in the shop." I hurried to find Marty. He was easy to spot, a mechanic covered in grease, with an unlit cigar clamped between his teeth. My job was simple: wash the cars on the lot and run errands to auto suppliers and other dealerships. I would use the company truck for supply runs, and I could take a used car home each night. Marty also told me I could take a car on Saturdays since I worked that day. Sundays, the dealership was closed. No one had mentioned this was a 6-day-a-week job, but I did not mind. It was not hard work, and it paid well. I was also earning more money than I ever had. By Wednesday evening, I finally went to Aunt Hilda's house to call Penny. I was nervous. I did not know what to expect, but she had called me first, so she was obviously thinking about me. After dinner, I sat in the living room and dialed the operator. I gave her Penny's hometown and phone number. After a series of clicks, another operator connected the call. The phone rang. A man answered. It did not sound like Mr. Lane, Penny's father. "Hello? Is this Walnut 29195 in Aberdeen?" I asked carefully. "That is right, but no one named Lane lives here," the man replied. "Oh, I see. Sorry to bother you." I slowly hung up the phone. I sat there, staring at the receiver, confused. I was certain I had dialed the right number. I had called it so many times over the years, I could do it in my sleep. Had they moved? The only way to find out was to send a letter to the old address and see if it was forwarded. If I got a reply, I would know where her family was. If the letter was returned unopened, I would have no way of finding her. Not much to lose for a 5-cent stamp. I wrote Penny a short letter, telling her I had received her message but missed her call. I said I would have loved to hear from her and hoped she was doing well. I ended the letter hoping we could start writing again. Then, I crossed my fingers and mailed it. Mom and Frank called twice a month, and I always enjoyed talking to them. Even if I was not in a private place, I still looked forward to those calls. Meanwhile, I had visited the Air Force recruiting office and spoken to an officer. With my university degree, I was eligible for officer candidate school. But there were no guarantees I would become a pilot. They could not promise anything. I spent the summer working at the car lot and saving money. The job was not bad. I got to drive a different car home every night, and they even provided half a tank of gas. I started paying attention to which used cars were reliable and which were not. Marty noticed. "You were smarter than most college kids," he told me. By Labor Day, my senior year had begun, but Penny was still missing from my life. As I wandered near the Coast Guard base, I noticed something I had never really thought about before. They had aircraft. I saw a transport plane and a few seaplanes taking off. Suddenly, the Coast Guard seemed like a cool option. It might be my best chance to fly. I knew I had to serve my country, but I did not want to end up in places like Vietnam. If I could not become a pilot, I had no idea how I would make a living. Would I end up selling vacuum cleaners? The thought was depressing. Without Liz to cheer me up, I was not particularly happy. I had a job at Capital Motors and a car to use, so I could not complain. I had money and could have gone on dates, but I was not interested in other girls. Instead, I spent my weekends with friends, went to sports events, had a few beers, and played pickup basketball sometimes, but nothing serious. I was lucky to have swimming to fill my time, but I did not enjoy my success on the team as much as before. It was probably because Liz was not there to push me to be better. It was not that I did not care, but I was not as motivated as I should have been for a team co-captain. No one said anything, but I could sense their disappointment. Frank and Mom came to my graduation, bringing Aunt Hilda with them. I enjoyed the day with them. I was happy to have graduated with good grades and could now add BA to my resume. We had a wonderful dinner at Aunt Hilda's, better than any restaurant. Mom and Frank gave me a nice blazer and slacks, and Aunt Hilda gifted me a stylish dress shirt and tie. All I needed was a new pair of dress shoes, and I would be ready for the business world. But first, I had a personal goal to achieve. I could have taken a chance and avoided joining the military, hoping I would not be drafted. But I really wanted to fly, and the military was my best shot. I also felt a duty to serve my country, but I did not want to die in some foreign land. So I decided to join the Coast Guard. It was not my first choice, but it would likely keep me out of Vietnam. And there was still a chance I could become a pilot. I traveled to Portland to enlist. After my physical exam, I had a couple of weeks to say goodbye to Mom, Frank, and Hilda, Marty, and my friends from Oregon State. This was the start of the rest of my life. I hoped something good would happen. 6 weeks later, I was thrilled to be accepted into flight school. We would start on trainer planes, and I did not care if they were old biplanes. I just wanted to fly. It turned out I got my wish. But it was harder than I expected. The engineering program was overwhelming. I had no idea learning to be a pilot was so complex. Navigation, flight controls, aircraft systems, emergency procedures, and much more. What got me through? My determination to succeed. I refused to let anything stop me. I spent countless hours studying to make sure I made it. The flying part was the easiest for me. I was not afraid of the plane and seemed to have a natural feel for it. That was a big reason I succeeded in flight school. Even though the studies were tough, I was on top of the world. Friendships and the Grumman Albatross during my time at Pensacola Flight School, I made some great friends. 2 of them became my best buddies, Tinker Tink Taylor and Chip Billstrom. All 3 of us loved flying and worked hard to earn our wings. We helped each other, even if it was just to cheer up when things got tough. We drank beer, chased girls, and became like brothers. Tink was a good old boy from northern Alabama, smart as a whip. He often helped me with the bookwork, while I helped him with the flying part. Chip was more like me, a flatlander from Fargo, North Dakota. He had to work harder than the rest of us to become a good pilot. Flying did not come naturally to him, but he pushed himself. At Officer Candidate School, OCS, we were expected to act like leaders and gentlemen. Well, almost all the time. We needed to relax now and then because the pressure was intense. Our first experience with an amphibious aircraft was with the Grumman Albatross. It was a massive, rugged aircraft that could land on both water and runways. I loved it from the moment I saw it. Sure, it was slow, noisy, and vulnerable to saltwater corrosion, but it was built like a tank. As Tink would say, we were luckier than a dog with 2 tails to be flying these planes. The Albatross might reach 200 knots on a good day, but it usually cruised at around 130 knots. We did not mind, unless it was an emergency mission when every minute counted. By the time we graduated flight school, Tink, Chip, and I had become incredibly close. We had visited almost every bar in Pensacola and had our share of fun. Having our pilot wings got us a lot of attention. Our only problem? The Navy pilots, the jet jockeys. They had more prestige than we did, but we held our own. All this time, I had thought about Penny. I had no idea where she was. I knew she wanted to be a writer, but that was all. It had been over 4 years since I had last seen her. I started thinking about who might know where she was. Then, I remembered Dorothy Perkins. After some trial and error, I found her phone number. "Hi, Dorothy. I do not know if you remember me. It is Ron Francis," I said hesitantly. "Oh, sure. I remember you, Ron. How are you?" she asked brightly. "I am fine, thanks." Dorothy, the reason I called, I am looking for Penny Lane." There was a pause. Oh, gee. "I do not know where she is, Ron," she admitted. "She left town with some guy. Brian was his name, I think. She mentioned New York, but I am not sure." New York. So she was with some guy. I was not sure I wanted to hear more. "Yeah, Brian something," Dorothy continued. "I do not think they were very close, though, if you know what I mean." "You mean she was not engaged or anything?" I asked, hoping for the best. "Oh, no. She told me he was just a boyfriend. Nothing serious." I felt a little relieved and thanked Dorothy for her help. I asked her to pass along a message if she ever saw Penny again. As I hung up the phone, I felt better. I was no closer to finding Penny, but there was hope, and that was enough to keep me searching. "Hi, I am Buck Rogers, and this is my sidekick, Steve Canyon," I started. The girls laughed immediately, so I knew we were off to a good start. "Can we buy you ladies a drink?" Chip asked with his best grin. "Sure, If it is okay with my husband, the blonde replied. I looked at Chip, and he looked at me. We had the same thought. Oh, too late. From behind the pool room, two huge guys appeared. They looked 7 feet tall and weighed at least 500 pounds each, with tattoos of alligators on their eyelids. We were in big trouble. What are you two jerks doing? The one in front asked. Sorry, man. We did not know the ladies were with someone. Our mistake, Chip said quickly. Mistake is right, his friend added. And the next thing I knew, I was on the floor, my jaw aching in pain, seeing stars. I am a pilot, not a fighter. These guys could kill us if we fought back. So I just picked myself up and headed for the door. I had no idea where Chip was. Then the big guy hit me again, this time on the ear. Down I went. A sharp pain shot through my head, and a ringing sound filled my ears. This was really bad. When I tried to stand again, I saw Chip slumped against the wall. The other guy was punching him repeatedly in the stomach and ribs. Chip tried to protect himself, but we were no match for these brutes. I thought we might end up in the hospital or worse. Then, we were saved. The MPs showed up just in time. I guess the bartender had called them. They broke up the fight. These two jerks were hitting on our wives. One of the big guys yelled, You military guys think you can take whatever you want. Next time I see you, there will not be any MPs around, and you will be sorry. I believed him. This was a place we needed to avoid from now on. We staggered out of the bar with the MP's help. Chip was in bad shape. I thought he might have broken a rib or two, and I was right. He could barely breathe. The MPs offered to take us back to the base so we could get medical help. I was probably going to have a sore jaw, maybe a couple of loose teeth, and a painful ear, but otherwise, I would live. Do not you guys ever learn? One of the MPs scolded us. Stay away from local trouble. Go uptown if you want to meet girls. Those two women thought that little scene was hilarious. Bet you did too, huh? The tough, petty officer sneered. We deserve the dressing down. Ignorance can be very painful, especially for Chip. We recovered from our injuries, although Chip was grounded for 3 weeks while he healed. It took the fun out of things for us. As Chip rightly pointed out, we were pilots, not fighters. We were outmatched. I was expecting some repercussions after the bar incident, but they never came. We got a lecture about using better judgment from our commanding officer, but that was it. I guess they thought we had learned our lesson. If it happened again, we would not be so lucky. A couple of weeks later, I ran into the MP who had helped us. I thanked him for stopping the fight and for not making a big deal of it with her boss. He smiled. I figured you two learned not to let it happen again, he said, shaking my hand. And that was that. Hurricane season was approaching, and it was a miserable, scorching hot August. The air was so thick it hurt to breathe. Flying was a great way to cool down, but on the ground, life was dull and suffocating as we waited for something to happen. Chip had a special way of handling the heat. He said he put his mind in neutral and zoned out. We joked about it, but we were all jealous. The rest of us were miserable. We tried everything to stay cool, but the air conditioner in the ready room could not handle the heat. Then, things got worse. Hurricane Bua was moving up the eastern Caribbean, heading straight for us. I thought I had seen bad weather before, but at 25,000 feet, looking at the storm's swirling pattern, I knew we were in serious trouble. 3 hours before the hurricane was expected to hit the Florida Keys, we were grounded. All we could do was watch. Anyone out in that storm would not get help for a while if they got into trouble. I had never feared the weather in Kodiak. It was rough and cold, but I knew only my mistakes or a mechanical failure could put me in danger. This was different. The hurricane was chaos. It was out of my control. Roofs were torn off buildings like paper. Palm trees bent over at 90 degrees. Debris flew everywhere. Anyone outside was in serious danger. During my time in Miami, I never got used to hurricanes. I had a few close calls while searching for damaged ships or lost boaters. Sometimes we stayed out too long, barely making it back to base. I loved the albatross, or goat as we called it. It was solid and reliable, like an old car. It had saved us many times. More importantly, we saved others. Thanks to a tight crew and a little bit of luck, I had a knack for flying these old grummets. I had flown at least 6 different ones, and each had its own personality. But they all behaved well for me. I felt like they knew I cared about them. Helicopters were starting to replace the albatross, and I thought my time in the Coast Guard might end when those old planes were retired. My next assignment was in New York City, more precisely, Brooklyn. Not the first place you think of for a Coast Guard station, but it was active and lively. It was here that my life took a new turn. My future became clearer. Tink had been sent to San Diego. Chip was posted in New London. And I got the Big Apple. I was still flying my beloved albatross, and I was happy. I was out of the hurricane zone and into the busy commercial shipping lanes. The North Atlantic could be stormy too, but with all the traffic between Boston and Baltimore, we stayed busy. Chip and I stayed in touch and sometimes visited each other. Tink was thrilled with San Diego, though he complained about having to return to flight school to qualify on the Fairchild C-123 provider, a fixed-wing, ground-based search and rescue aircraft. We felt bad for him, but we knew our time would come. Brooklyn was about to become a training base for helicopters. I might have to give up my goat. That made me sad. Call me old-fashioned, but that is how I felt. The life was nearly squeezed out of me as Penny clung to me, tears in her eyes. I had to admit, my eyes were a bit wet too. When she finally let go, I stepped back and took a good look at her. I was stunned. She had always been pretty, but now she was absolutely beautiful. I just shook my head, unable to find words, but she could see everything she needed to in my eyes. Ron, it is so good to see you. You look so handsome in your uniform. And you seem taller than I remember, she said with wonder. I cannot believe how gorgeous you are, Penny. We have both changed a lot in the last few years, I said, smiling. Has it really been that long? I cannot believe it. You have to tell me everything. You said it was an amazing story, and I am a writer, so I want to hear all about it, she laughed. Well, I did kind of promise my life story to the guy who helped me find you, Warren Quincy, as a thank you, I joked. Oh well, as long as he brought us back together, I cannot complain, she said, looking truly happy. That made me feel great. But I will still tell you everything, I promised. First, what did you want to talk about when you called from Eugene? I had to ask. It had been on my mind for years. Oh, I wanted to let you know I had broken up with my boyfriend, she said carefully. I wanted you to know that I still cared about you. I stood still for a moment, then instinctively took a step toward her, wrapped my arms around her, and kissed her. I kissed her deeply, and in that moment, every doubt I had about us vanished. She returned the kiss, wrapping her arms around my neck. It was a kiss neither of us would ever forget. We had waited so long for this moment, not sure if it would ever come. We stood in the doorway of her apartment, lost in the kiss, not caring if anyone saw us. Finally, we pulled back, and I closed the door before pulling her close again and kissing her more gently. Have we really waited this long and not known how we felt about each other? I asked. Yes, we have. The look in her eyes told me everything. We had lost each other before, and now we had found each other again. Neither of us wanted to be apart anymore. It was the beginning of the happiest time in my life, and I knew it right then. I am not sure how long it took us to get to the bedroom, but it did not matter. We did not need to talk about it. Neither of us was new to this, but this first time, with the woman I had waited so long for, it was going to be special. And it was. We took our time, and it was deeply emotional for both of us. It felt like I had been set free, like I had found my love still waiting for me after 7 years. I was not just excited, I was relieved. She still felt the same way about me. It felt like nothing had changed, except that we were older, more mature, and Penny was even more beautiful. I wanted this time with her to last forever. Ron, can you stay tonight? She whispered. I mean, yes. I still have almost a week of leave. I cannot believe my luck, finding you. We have time to be together, I promised. Yes, we do not need to rush. We can get to know each other again, she smiled. I cannot think of anything I would rather do, I whispered. She nuzzled into my shoulder and neck, and we just lay there for a while. Whatever she had planned for dinner was forgotten. If I was hungry, it was for Penny. The food could wait. It must be exciting working on those big white boats, she said later. Well, maybe. But that is not what I do, I smiled. Oh, what do you do? I fly airplanes, I said proudly. What? You are a pilot? She exclaimed. Yep. I fly an airplane called an albatross. It is a kind of flying boat. It can land on both water and land. Wow. Ron Francis from Aberdeen, Iowa, is a pilot. That is amazing, she said, sounding genuinely surprised. How did that happen? How did you become a pilot and join the Coast Guard? It took some time to tell the story, but over the next hour, I shared how I had found my love for flying thanks to Mom and Frank. I talked about how lucky I was to get into the Coast Guard. I left out the dangerous parts and my occasional blunders, making it sound as exciting as I could, wanting to impress my Penny. I did not mention Liz at all. We were lying on her bed while I talked, and she seemed really interested. I was also eager to hear her story. Dad got a new job in Dubuque, so he and Mom moved there just after I started college. I stayed with a friend, Bobby Jenkins. You remember her, right? We were in most of the same classes. I was lucky to have a place to stay. When I graduated, I wanted to work for a newspaper, but there were no jobs in Aberdeen or Dubuque. I sent out dozens of resumes, but nothing came of it. In the end, I got a job at State Farm Insurance in the advertising department. I wrote a few magazine pieces, small stuff like that. At least I was getting paid to write. How did you end up in New York? I asked, curious. Brian, the guy I was seeing at the time, suggested it. He said I would have a better chance of finding work here. He was moving to New York for a job too, and he used that to convince me to come with him. I thought about it for a while. I did not really want to be with him. He was nice, but he was not you, she said, looking at me closely. Anyway, I took a chance and went with him to see if I could get a break. It was probably a mistake, but I was eager, so I did it. What happened with Brian? I asked. He thought I loved him. I did not. When I told him, he got really mad. He said I led him on and made him look foolish. It was a rough time. I grabbed my things and left. I had some money, so I rented this place. And I have been here ever since. You have been here for 3 years? Yes. 3 very tough years. There were times when I did not have a dime or anything to eat. I just had to push through to prove I could do it. I could not let my parents know I was struggling so much. They never supported my dream of being a writer. They thought I would end up a starving artist. I almost did, she laughed. Are you still struggling? Not so much anymore, she said, sounding proud. I have a couple of regular columns, and I have sold a few features, which has helped a lot. I also work part-time writing ads for a small agency. Altogether, I am doing a lot better, she smiled. Wow, that sounds really tough. I am amazed you stuck with it. Many people would have given up, I said. Ron, you know this is what I wanted to do. I had to try. I had to see if I could make it. I still think I can. I just need a break, and I can make a career out of this, she said seriously. Good for you, Penny. I am proud of you. I am so glad I found you. It is all I have thought about these past years. I wanted to fly, and I got that chance. And I wanted to find you. And now here we are. I cannot ask for more. I feel the same, Ron. I think we were meant to be together. I had nearly given up hope of ever seeing you again. And then your call this afternoon, and now, us, here, together. Yes, I do. To be honest, sometimes I lost hope that I would find you. But the way things have turned out, yes, we are supposed to be together. Someone or something is making this happen, and I do not want to fight it or ignore it. Do you? 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Penny that finally allowed me to breathe easy again. She understood, and she felt I had done something important by telling her the truth. She said she knew I had taken a risk by telling her about Liz when I could have kept quiet. The more she thought about it, the more she was proud of me for being honest. She reassured me that she had never even considered breaking our engagement. She was mine forever. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Every waking moment, I thought about surviving this tour and getting home to Penny. Home was now New York City. I sent my pay to Penny, and she handled it like it was her main job. We wrote letters constantly. You would think we would run out of topics, but Penny would tell me about the latest moves she had made with our money, how it was growing, the rising cost of housing, and how we would qualify for a mortgage. That is the good thing about being a writer. She always had something to say. I tried not to tell her how horrible the war was. Penny took charge while I was in Vietnam, and I could not have been happier. It helped me focus on my duty and stay safe. I was not ready for war, and I did not know much beyond following orders, doing my best, and trying to stay out of trouble. Our airplane, the Goat, was constantly in danger if we got too close to the enemy. This made us extremely focused. The weather was also a major problem. Our base was on the coast, and bad weather often made rescue operations nearly impossible. Like Miami, the humidity and salt water were brutal on our plane. Our days as a rescue unit were numbered. We were being limited in how we could use the full ability of our aircraft, and it was frustrating to see it deteriorate before my eyes. I spent 15 difficult months in Da Nang, and when I finally left, I did not feel proud, just relieved. I had made it through in one piece. The entire deployment felt pointless. We saved a few pilots and some lives, but I could not help but wonder if we could have done more with a bigger effort. When I returned home, I was lucky not to face any protesters. Most people did not even know that the Coast Guard had been part of the Vietnam War. both on water and in the air for rescue and combat. Back in New York, I was overjoyed to see not only Penny but also my mother and Frank. It felt incredible to be back in the United States. Penny had organized everything, and her parents were arriving the next day. I had not seen them in 8 years and wondered what they would think of me. I was not worried, but I still wanted to be on my best behavior. I should not have worried at all. Mr. and Mrs. Lane welcomed me like a son from the moment they arrived. They were proud to have me in the family and deeply respected my service. They got along well with my mother and Frank, which was a huge relief. I had been afraid there might be some tension because of my mother's past, but Penny had explained everything to them after I left for college, and it was never an issue. The only difficult part was not having any private time with Penny. I had gone 15 months without holding her, and with both sets of parents around, we could not find a moment alone together until they all left. I was curious about how Penny's parents could afford the trip, and that was when she told me she had invested my pay in 2 strong stocks, Polaroid and Texas Instruments. They had done very well, and the dividends had paid for her parents' flights. I was incredibly proud of her. She was truly remarkable. After our parents left nearly a week later, they made us promise to set our wedding date soon. Finally, we had time to ourselves. That first night together was as wonderful as I had imagined during all those lonely nights in Da Nang. We held each other close and talked late into the night, just enjoying being together again. I remember waking up a couple of times, reaching for Penny just to make sure she was really there. I would pull her close and kiss her shoulder, savoring her scent and the softness of her skin. It felt like being home again. I had 6 months left in my service, and I already knew I would not re-enlist. I loved the Coast Guard and flying my plane, but my time there was coming to an end. I needed to find a civilian job. Fortunately, I already had an offer from Frank to fly for North Island Airways. I wanted the job badly, but there was a problem. Penny had her career in New York. I did not want to make her give up everything she had worked so hard for. I had waited so long to be with her, and I did not want to lose her now. Frank had offered me the job as soon as I told him I was almost done with the Coast Guard. He needed another pilot with my skills, and he was willing to wait for me. Normally, I would have accepted right away, but I told Frank I had to think about Penny's career first and talk to her. He smiled and said, "I waited a long time for your mother, so I can wait a bit longer for you." I was nervous to talk to Penny about Frank's offer. It meant leaving New York and having her start over, but I really wanted the job. I loved the Pacific Northwest and hoped Penny would too, but I could not forget how hard she had worked to establish herself in New York. It took me a long time to gather the courage to bring it up. "Penny, I need to tell you something important," I began. She smiled. "Yes? I am not re-enlisting in the Coast Guard when my time is up," I said slowly. "I know. You have already told me that," she said, still smiling. "I wanted you to know I got a job offer," I said nervously. "Really? Tell me about it." "Frank offered me a job at North Island," I replied, stammering. "Really? And what would you be doing?" "Flying. I am a pilot, and he needs another pilot." "Yes, you are a pilot," she teased. "The thing is, it is in Washington." "Up in the Northwest," I continued, still hesitating. "I know where it is," she said, almost laughing. "What is so funny?" I asked. You are afraid I will not want to go to Bellingham, aren't you?" She said. "Well, your career is just starting here in New York. I cannot take you away from that," I said softly. "Oh, Ron, you were thinking of me and willing to sacrifice for me." "Yes, I was. I have waited so long for us to be together. I was not going to let my dreams break us apart." She sat in my lap and hugged me. "My dear Ron, my typewriter is portable, and so am I. I will go anywhere with you. I love you, and I will not let you give up something important to you. Writers can write anywhere. Frank's neighbor, Ernie Gann, told me that," she said, then kissed me. "Frank told me about the offer. If it makes you happy, then I will be happy." "Really?" I do not know what to say. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I am very sure. I love you and want to be with you. Besides, your mother told me how beautiful it is there. She said it is a great place to raise kids." "She did? How many kids?" "Oh, I do not know. Maybe 2, maybe 10, she laughed. "How about 2 to start with, and we can decide from there." "Okay, whatever you say," she grinned. "You are enjoying this, are you not? You knew I wanted to keep flying. You knew about Frank's offer, and you did not say a word." "You were sneaky," I said, tickling her sides playfully. She wiggled and laughed, trying to make me stop. Okay, I confess. She shouted, still laughing. I love you, Ron. I always have, and I always will. I will go with you anywhere. I will have your kids. I will be there for you every day, she said suddenly, completely serious. Oh, God, Penny. I am so lucky. I have everything I ever wanted. I am so lucky, I whispered, holding her tightly.